What's happening, people? I'm DJ Graish, and in today's video I'm going to teach you how to put together a drum and bass drum rack, including all of the samples, including some breaks, putting some effects on there and doing some processing. But first of all, let me just make sure the stream's working. So, my apologies if you were waiting in the other stream. It wouldn't let me add the thumbnail, so I had to create another one. But big up if you've been waiting, and I hope you find your way to this one. So as I said, today it's all about the drum rack. It's all about building a DNB drum kit. And let's get started. So first thing I'm going to do is just create a new live set. Don't save that. That one's just called Side Quest. Alright, so when it comes to the drum rack, you need a MIDI clip. Alright, let me full screen this. So I'm going to get rid of these 3 tracks and just leave ourselves with a MIDI track. And today's BPM is going to be 174. Alright, so next thing I'll do is just go to Instruments and get the drum rack and put that there. So this is the drum rack. For anybody who is kind of new to Ableton Live, the drum rack, it has these pads. Right now you can see 16, but there are many pads, you know. And what you do is you put a different drum sample on each one, and then if you've got some kind of a MIDI controller like the Akai MPD controllers or something like that, you can play the pads. Also, if you've got the Ableton Push, you can control the drum rack with that, or you can just draw in MIDI notes. It's still just as worthwhile even if you don't have any MIDI controllers. So where I keep my samples is this production folder here, and this Jekyll and Hyde one has been pretty useful in these videos. Actually, first let me go to this one, the drum and bass sample pack. Now, let me just explain a little bit about my tactic. So you can see we've got 16 pads, and what I'm going to do is, in the first column, I'm going to put a load of kicks. And in the second column, I'm going to put a load of snares. In the last 2 columns, you know, it'll be hi-hats, bits of chopped up break, and maybe even a crash. So the way I was thinking about doing it is the bottom layer could be more chilled out drums, you know, and then we could have a medium, you know, medium intensity, and then followed by some harder ones. So when it comes to the kicks, let's have a listen. So I'm going to put the crime wave one here. Maybe the rack. Put the rack one there as well. And then let's have a listen to the snares. So as I was saying, it would be good to have maybe some more chilled out drums along the bottom. And I like to turn off this snapping, by the way. Get rid of that. So chilled out drums along the bottom, and then some medium intensity ones in this row here, and then some harder ones. So that's why I've put the rooftop snare down here, because it's a bit of a chiller. Let's see what we've got in the way of hi-hats. You know, maybe shaker 1 could be useful. I'll just stick that there. As for the snares, maybe Parasite, not really though. Okay, we'll put Parasite there, maybe temporarily. And then we're going to go to the Jekyll and Hyde ones. Have a listen to some of these. So I think maybe all right, 2 and 3. Then let's go to the snares. So snare 4 is kind of a slapping one. Could put that there, and then snare 5 is pretty good, kind of a boxier one. Now what I like to do is with these perk ones, you can hear that some of them have more than one sound per sample. For example, this perk 4, when you put it into the drum rack here, you can see there's the 2 samples. What I'll do is, with the first one, I'll just shorten it down to there. Just zoom in to make sure it's on point. And then, if you just drag that from one pad of the drum rack to the other and hold down Alt, now you've got a copy of it, and on this one you can put it to the second sound. So, like that. Alright, next, let's have a listen to some of these hats. So hat 4 and 5. Even if you don't end up using all of them, you know. Alright, so we've got the first 16 squares of the drum rack sorted. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put together a quick loop of drums and just see how they're sounding. If they're sounding good, we're all good, and if we notice that we just don't have any good snares out of all them, we can just choose some other snares. One thing I like to do is, you see this little headphone symbol here, just click that, and then whenever you click any of these samples on this keyboard here, you actually get to hear them. So let's put a snare there and there. And you know, so for the more chilled ones, it could be like this. And you got to make sure you loop it. So if you want to loop a clip, this is a 1-bar clip, right? So just click the clip and press Command and L. So that puts the looper around it, and then when you play it, it'll just loop. Now the great thing is about the drum rack, there's various different ways you can alter the volumes of these sounds, right? Now each one of them has a volume control down here in the bottom. Then you've also got this sort of mini mixer here of all the different volumes which you can change. So for example, if I wanted to, I can just put the hats down by 5 dB. And then if you go into this other view here and open up this arrow, you'll see all your sounds there as well. So that's another place where you can adjust the volume. So that's 3. And it's really up to you which one you find the easiest to be where the place where you manage the volumes of your drum hits, you know. So for example, you can do a pattern like this where it goes, you know, goes into sort of double time. And what about the shaker? That could do sort of a just one on every bar or every beat like that, sorry. Like, let's just turn this shaker down a bit. Right, again, with these perks, I want to use them, but they sound a bit loud, so I'll put them down by 5 dB to start with. Now you might hear that they are, big up Hakeem, thanks for listening, man. You might notice that when you put the 16th notes on the grid, they do start to sound a little bit robotic. So what you can do is just grab certain notes and just hold down Command, click on one of them, hold down Command, and just drag it a little bit over. And that will sort of give it a bit of a swing and maybe make it sound a little bit more human, you know. You can do that with the perks, and then there's these hats here as well. And actually, if you zoom in, you can try to line them up. Right, now the shaker, it did sound good actually. Maybe the shaker's something else that should be swung a bit. Yeah, I know what you mean, Hakeem. When it comes to sequencing them, it is definitely more difficult, and sometimes the results sound a bit cheesy. So for that reason, it is definitely easier to just go straight to the breaks. But I decided that in this video, what I want to do is show you how to have a drum rack that's a hybrid of both, so that you can have your individual hits, and then you can have some bits of break, and you can put them into the drum rack as well, and you've got it all in one place. And then I'm going to add some processing and some different effects and stuff, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to save this as, you know, a preset, so that anytime you start a DNB tune, you can just drag in your DNB drum rack, and you've already got like 4 kicks, 4 snares, 4 hi-hats, etc. to choose from, and it'll help you get on your way quicker when you're trying to get your ideas down. So I'd say the shaker, I like it, but it's too loud. Where is it now? Shaker 1, put that down to 6. And it does sound like it's slightly over to the right, so I might emphasize that a bit more and put it more to the right. So what I'm going to do is, next thing I'm going to do is just get a break and put that in there. So if I go to where my breaks are, and get the hot pants break. Let's have a listen. I knew it would do that. So what I've done is I just grabbed the end of the audio clip and held down shift and dragged it to the left so that it's just 2 bars, you know, because it was basically playing it at halftime. So another thing that you need to do, if you've not already done it, when it comes to warping, me personally, I don't like the sound of the beats algorithm, and I'm sure you can make it sound good if you start messing about with it, but if you put it to complex, I just usually find that sounds a lot better, so that's what I usually do. Now it's optional at this point whether you want to start moving the warp markers around, or if you want to, you can just go straight to the slicing. So what I'm going to do is right click the hot pants clip and click slice to a new MIDI track. Now it's on 1/8 of a note, and that's fine for me, so I just choose OK and then ditch the audio track with the hot pants on it. Now if we go to these slices, what I need to do now is go through these slices one by one and make sure the start and end points are nice and tidy so that they start at the right place, and more importantly they finish before the thing tries to play the next sample. And this is an example of what I'm on about here, where it's basically just about to play that extra bit that you don't want, so you just move the end marker a little bit to the left to make sure it doesn't. And with this one, with ones like this, you can choose whether it starts from there or whether it starts from there, and obviously you're going to get a different effect with each. So if you start it here, you've got this sort of pre-ring before the snare, which is also going to help with the swing of the break. Otherwise, if you want to, you can just line it right up to where it's starting, and obviously that's going to tighten it up, or it might take away a little bit of the groove, so you just got to be careful. And this one, you know, slice 14, as I was saying, you could start it from there or you could start it from there, but not any earlier than that. Anyway, so that's the hot pants break, and it's all sliced up, and it's all on its own MIDI clip with its own drum rack. So one thing I was thinking is, I'm going to get rid of this clip here. One thing I was thinking is, what about if we just drag these slices into our drum rack? So you've got all your kicks and snares here, right? And if you notice over to the left of them, you've got this sort of grid, a really small grid of 16 squares, and what you can do is just click above that, and now you're into sort of the next bank of samples. So what we could do is, I mean, I don't really want the whole hot pants break. I think I'm going to do the first 8 slices. So slice 1, I'm going to grab it, I'm going to drag it to the drum rack, but still holding down the mouse button until we put it to this square, and then let go. Right, and I don't know why, but it's decided to put looping on, so I'm going to take that off. Oh yeah, and that was it. I always say, when you do slice to MIDI and you've got a break all sliced up, turn down this loop length to 0. And I don't even know why that's on by default, and it always, you know, it catches you off guard sometimes. Now that I've done that, when I'm dragging the other slices over, they're not slicing with looping on. So it's kind of a tedious one, but I'm just dragging them over slice by slice, and as far as I'm aware, you can't just drag 8 at a time, but if you can, if someone knows how to do that, just let me know. But I did try before, before going live. I was like, can you drag 2 at a time? Can you drag 8 at a time by holding down shift or holding out alt or whatever? But I couldn't figure out how to do it. So we've got our drums that I was programming in before. Obviously they're sounding like badly mixed and a bit sharp, especially that hat. But the point is, Now within the same drum rack and the same MIDI clip, you have these bits of break. So I can delete the hot pants layer now. And if I just drag this upwards, you'll see that now at the top of here, you've got slice 1, slice 2. So I could do a, and by the way, these slices are 1/8 notes. So before I put them in, I'm just going to put the grid on 1/8 notes. All right. So we've got slice 1 is the kick. How about this? Right, now I'm just going to bring these hats down some more. There's also those perk 4 and perk 4. Bring them down. You know, it's all about getting the mix right. You can do that now or you can do that later. So that's how you put drum hits and breaks into the same drum rack. So just for fun, let's put another break there at the top of it. We've got another little spare 8 slices there. So let's go with Amen Brother. Tried and tested. So I'm going to go for, let me just turn warping off first of all. And if you're not familiar with the Amen break, it is a drum solo from a track from the 1960s called Amen Brother by the Winstons, and it sounds like this. So I'm just going to cut off the first half of it and basically start our little sample that we want from here, which is a kick, and I'm going to put that onto the beat 5. So now we've got a 2-bar section, and you can see that from bar 5 to bar 7 there, this is going way past it. So what I'll do is I'll just turn the warping back on again, and then with the shift button held down, I'll just drag the end of the clip so that it's 2 bars long. And briefly, I'll put the metronome on just to have a little listen and make sure this sounds like it's on beat. So next thing I'll do is just quickly right click that and slice it to a new MIDI track, and then I'm going to get rid of the audio just to keep everything neat and tidy. So remember that loop length, that's going straight down to 0, and then it's time to go through these slices. So by the way, you can either click this little button over here with the rectangle to open up the sample viewer. Also, you can double click any one of these slices and it just opens up the view of it. So I'm just going to go through all of these one at a time and make sure that they are, you know, the start and end points are all tidy. And when it comes to these slices, this is what I call a shuffle. Well, it's not just me. Many people call it a shuffle. You know, I'm slicing this into 1/8 notes, and here are some 16th notes, which means you've got 2 per slice, right? Now, you might wonder, why isn't he triggering the sample from right on the where the sound comes there, as in here? And the reason is because when it comes to playing back the slices, we're putting them on the grid, right? Which would make it sound very robotic if I lined up the start points perfectly with the start of each hit. So what I do is, where I can, for example in this one, I leave it naturally as it was when it was chopped up. That way, if the slice is perfectly on grid, but then it plays this little gap before the sample, then that will mean that there is a little bit of groove to it, and that will help your track to sound, you know, maybe a bit more like it was played by a human rather than a computer. This is a perfect example here. Look at this, the end of this slice, and look where the end marker is. It's basically, there's another kick that's starting, which is going to sound, let's just play it. So you can hear that it sounds disgusting, and it's good that we caught that, because if I would have started to just program in the notes for this sequence, then every time that slice played, it would make, you know, sometimes it can, you sort of, you don't realize, and then one day you solo that, and then you're like, hang on, what's that click? And the worst part is that I've been doing this since 2008, and sometimes you go back to one of your tunes from years ago that you always thought was produced pretty well, and then you solo the breaks and you're listening out and there's just like clicks and horrible sounds all over the place. So don't make the same mistakes as me. Learn from my mistakes and go through all your slices and make sure they all sound good. Anyway, so as I was doing before, I was just dragging slice by slice into the drum rack. You know, realistically, I mean, here you've got that crash, which is infamous, but you don't have to drag all of these 16 slices in if you don't want to. I mean, we could just do slices 1 to 8. It all depends on whether you want to use the crash, I suppose. So without further ado, let me drag these in here. And now you see we've got slice 1, slice 2, and then we've got slice 1, slice 2 again. So this might be a good it might be a good idea now to actually name these Amen slice 1, or, you know, Amen 1, Amen 2, so that we're not confusing ourselves. All right, last one. I'm just going to do slice 8 and leave it there. So now if I go back into the MIDI clip, as you can see, oops, that's not the right one. Right, I'm going to delete the Amen Brother MIDI clip. Don't need that. Now let's go back into our pink MIDI clip here, and this is the one that's got the drum hits from further down in this drum rack, as in these ones. And then on the top layer, we've got the Hot Pants break sliced up and the Amen break sliced up. So let's have a listen. Might need to loop that again. Right, now, so far the Hot Pants break is programmed. And what I need to do now is do the same for the Amen. But not sure if any of you guys saw my how to make jungle on the Ableton Push tutorial, but on that one I was saying, no, sorry, it was the how to make a 140 breaks tune, which is my most popular video so far by miles, and it's almost on 10,000 views. And if any of you guys saw that, I was talking about the importance of this one slice of the Amen break, which is slice 7, and it's the only time in the break where it occurs that there's I was calling it a hat, but someone in the comments corrected me that it's actually a ride cymbal. But the point is, it's a ride cymbal that's an 8th note rather than a 16th. So what you can do is you can do kick, ride, snare, rather than, you know, at the beginning of each bar of the Amen break it goes kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, you know what I mean? So if you want to do, instead of it being kick, kick every time, you can do kick, ride, snare like this. Like that, and then snare obviously, and then shuffle, shuffle, kick, snare, shuffle, like this. Now I kind of felt like it was cutting off a bit early with the snare of the Amen, so I'll just put that a little bit later. So as you can hear, it's building up bit by bit. We've got our individual hits, including kick, snares, and hi-hats. We've got the hot pants break, and we've got the Amen break, and they're all playing from one drum rack, which is absolutely awesome because now we can start to add some stuff to it. So, for example, the first thing I'd like to do is go to Dynamics and choose the glue compressor and just put that there. And let's just, for a moment, let's just drag this upwards. Oops. So, let's have a look. One thing I was going to say there is that, like, obviously we've got the main snare plus the snare of the hot pants break and the snare of the Amen, and they're all layered on top of each other. And one thing you need to do is be careful that it's not just eating up all your headroom to have these hits layered up like that. And one thing you can do is just maybe turn down the snare of the break a little bit, and then it's going to allow you to have... It's essentially doing a little bit of compression without the compressor, right? You just turn down the snare of the break, and then the shuffle parts are, by comparison, louder. Anyway, what I'm doing here is I'm using the ratio of only 2 to 1. And when you do that, suddenly it starts moving the needle a lot more. So let me just back off the threshold a bit. And you can see also, this is another good point, that when, watch the glue compressor, you can see that it's literally just the kick that it's reacting to and nothing else. What does that tell you? Let's go to the mixer here. Look at the kick in comparison to this snare here. So it just tells you that probably you could bring up the volume of the entire drum kit if you just turn down the kick a bit. Right. Something like that. And I do need to be careful because right now that's peaking at around -2. So that's fine, but obviously don't want to push it any further than that because it's going to start distorting the stream. Anyway, we've got our glue compressor. What's next? How about the drum bus? Now, I was saying last week, there's a trim function here, and I don't know why, but when you drag the drum bus in, it's just automatically 5 or 6 dB louder. And what you want to do is just bring down that trim before you start messing about with the drum bus, and that way you'll have roughly the same volume before as after. And in fact, I was saying it was hitting -2, so let's have a look now. You see? I'm hitting -2 with 6 dB of trim. So sometimes, because what it is, is they say that everybody just thinks stuff sounds better when it's louder. So you might put the drum bus on your drums and suddenly you're like, yeah, my drums are sounding so much fatter and beefier now, but what they really are is just 5 dB louder than they were. So obviously you're going to think it sounds better. So what you want to do is use this trim function and gain match it so that it's literally the same volume before and after. And then you can use this on and off button of the drum bus or whatever effect you're using and turn it on and off again and just see, does it sound better without it? Does it sound better with it? If it sounds better without it, just literally delete it and, choose a different effect or choose a different path of what you want to do with your drums. And in this case, tell me what you think in the chat, but that's without it. And then it gets a bit beefier, but there is this damp function. I don't think I've ever spoken about this on the channel before, but the damp, it basically takes off a lot of the high end, and you can see right now it's set to 9.2 kilohertz. So this is another thing that you need to be careful of, because you're dragging a tool onto your drums that's literally taking off all the top end, and that can be fine if it's intentional, but if you have no idea what you're doing and you're just like, suddenly, like, what happened to all the high end of my drums? Well, they got damped. So this is how it's sounding with that. And actually, to me, a lot of the time, it does actually sound better with the... You know, it's very easy to build up too much high end in your tracks if you've got hi-hats and rides and all this stuff going on. And sometimes the damp just takes the edge off, as the name suggests. You know, it just slightly dampens it. So it can sound good, but just be careful with it. Be intentional with it. So we've got the glue compressor, we've got the drum bus, and then I'm going to also add the new staple. It's the tape emulation, which I'm going to use this to tape 8. And I'm glad you can actually see the controls this week. So, as I was saying, whenever you add a new effect, make sure you turn it down so that when you turn it on and turn it off, it's still the same level. So, with a bit of luck, if I try this now, and by the way, let me just get rid of a few things like the flutter and the head bump. But now I've maxed out the input, I've turned the output down to -13, and let's see where we're peaking. We're peaking at -10 now, and it's sounding crunchy as hell. I'll just back that off a bit and bring this input back up. Anyway, let me know in the chat if you can. How are the levels? How's the mic compared to the music? Am I too loud? Am I too quiet? Is the music, you know, are these drums just ridiculously quiet? Just let us know. And now I'm feeling like this is actually a bit much. So I'm going to back that right off. So what we've got now is, you know, that drum rack full of hits, plus 2 breaks, plus the glue compressor, the drum bus, and to tape. And I'm going to just group these all together. So I'll click the drum rack, holding down Shift, and click the last one, which is the tape emulation, and Command and G to group it together. And now this is all one instrument rack. And what we can do is you can click this little save icon. In fact, there's one down here. So here's the save icon for the whole instrument rack. And what we can do is call that DNB Drumrack, right? Called DNB DRUMRACK. Now it's not just a drum rack, it's the drum rack with the glue compressor, the drum bus, and to tape 8. And we can take it much further than that even. So I was saying to you last week that if you go to audio effects and the EQ and filters, just get an EQ8 and you can drag that directly onto these pads of the drum rack, right? So for example, slice 3 is a hi-hat. No, it's a snare. So I've just dragged a EQ8 onto the snare, and we're just gonna roll it off about 166. So I don't really want to like eat into the actual frequencies of the snare. I just want to make sure there's no low end rumble, you know what I mean? So that's just an example, but you know, what you can do is every single slice of this can be EQ'd to have it exactly how you want it to sound. So, for example, this kick, you might decide that you want to take out a little bit of the lower mids, just like that. And what you can do here in the drum rack, you've got a mute and a solo for every pad. So let me solo the kick. And this is another thing, you know, when you do a move with an EQ, what you can do is just either turn off the whole EQ and turn it back on again and listen to the before and after, or you can do it with these individual nodes of the EQ8, right? So let's listen to the kick and then I'll turn on this. Now you might think, why the hell is he so bothered about scooping out the lower mids out of the kick? Because there's going to be a lot going on there and it's going to end up muddy, right? So the point is here is that you can put the EQ8 onto each individual slice, so, or even, you know, every individual hit. For example, you got the kick there, you got the snare here. Let's put the EQ8 on, because that snare that I was EQing before was actually part of the break, but there I've EQ'd the actual main snare. And then these hats. With stuff like this, you can take it much further. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you see how at the bottom here you've got sub bass information in the hi-hat. So when I say take it a lot further, what I mean is you can roll off the sub bass, you can roll off the lower mids, you can roll off even the upper mids, and then literally just have it so that it's only anything above 3 kilohertz that's actually coming through. And you can go through and do that with every hit of the drums and even the slices of the break. Now, I would recommend being careful when it comes to EQ in the individual slices of the break, because you might be tempted to take the sub bass out of the shuffle, but just be careful, because if you go too far with it, then it just sounds really disjointed when the kick slice is full spectrum and then the snare is less and then the shuffle is even less, you know. So obviously this has ended up sounding quite amen heavy,